Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to Brooklands today and for joining us to celebrate Alastair's 90-year life. So, my name is Giles Pugh. I'm Alastair's son, and with Allan Winn here, the former chief executive of Brooklands, we're going to be tying the threads together while different members of the family and different friends will be giving their thoughts and reminiscences about Alastair. So, once upon a time, Alastair and I had one of those career chats. Now, as you might expect, for Alastair, this was actually pretty straightforward. From the age of 11, he said, well, Giles, it was either cars or aeroplanes, and in fact what happened was he did both. So these are our two prevalent themes throughout today. But first of all, what we'd like to do is to start with a prayer from Canon Chris Vance. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, isn't it great to be here? Yesterday, we performed the funeral rites for Alastair. Today, we come to celebrate and to give thanks for his long life, well lived. We've come to remember him with love, happily recalling all that has been so good in his life, and every good thing and good time that you and so many others have enjoyed with him. But I believe it's fitting that now at the outset of our celebration, we should take a moment to think even more deeply and spiritually. To this end, I will now offer a short prayer, and I hope that you will feel able to associate with it in your own particular way and with whatever faith and whatever measure of faith you may have. So shall we just bow our heads? O loving Heavenly Father of us all, in joyful celebration we remember Alastair today. We thank you for all that has been good in his life, for all that he has enjoyed, and for all that he has accomplished. We thank you for all the good things that he shared with us and with so many others. We thank you for all his many gifts and abilities and for the way in which he used them. In confidence in you, O God, we have commended Alastair to your infinite mercy and boundless love. May he rest in peace. Amen.
So, Canon Christopher, thank you very much for that. Three of Alastair's grandchildren will now read a poem that was found, coming and going a bit, that was found in Alastair's papers, which perfectly captures how for Alastair it was about cramming in as much as possible into our allotted span here on Earth. So, Genevieve, Sophie and Alexander.
What shall I think when I am called to die? Shall I not find too soon my life has ended?
The years, too quickly, have hastened by, with so little done of all that I intended. There were so many things I meant to try.
So many contests I had hoped to win. And lo, the end approaches, just as I was thinking of preparing to begin.
entirely in order. And I hope you felt that that was absolutely Alastair to a T. Okay, so Alastair's passion for Fraser Ashes, as many of you know, began at the age of 21. The buccaneering, no-nonsense spirit that epitomises that mark is absolutely, again, Alastair to a T. Historically, Nash's greatest successes have been in the Alps. So here are a few images of Alastair nashing in the mountains.
Questi giorni quando vieni il bel sole, la 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 la. On days like these when skies are blue and fields are green, I look around and think about what might have been, and then I hear sweet music float around my head as I recall the many things we left unsaid. It's on days like these that I remember singing songs and drinking wine while your eyes played games with mine. On days like these I wonder what became of you. Maybe today you're singing songs with someone new. I'd like to think you're walking by those willow trees, remembering the love we knew on days like these. It's on days like these that I remember singing songs and drinking wine while your eyes played games with mine. On days like these, I wonder what became of you. Maybe today you're singing songs with someone new. Questi giorni quando vieni il bel sole, la 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 la. La 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 la.
Okay, so now let's move on to Le Mans. Now, for many British sports car drivers, this is the ultimate challenge. And so, Alastair Pugh, there's no mistake there, otherwise known as A2P2, Alastair's namesake, we'll now read some extracts from an article that Alastair wrote about his own race at Le Mans. Alastair.
It was Alastair's lifelong ambition to race at Le Mans. In 2001, the opportunity arrived. I'd like to read an excerpt of an article Alastair wrote about the race. He called it A Weekend in France for the over 45s. The hubbub died, 61 engines were silent. With unfelt casualness, we strolled across the track. We lined up opposite our cars. Spectators in the towering tribunes surged forward. My heart was thumping. Somewhere a horn sounded. 3-minute signal, 1 minute, who could tell? Then suddenly we were running. It was Ray Wilshire, the urbane and long-time president of the Bentley Drivers Club, who had caught me wholly unprepared with his suggestion. Why don't you enter a Fraser Nash in the Legends race? You should have a go. Have a go? Race at Le Mans? Ye gods, what would it mean? International historic licence, ECG for the medical, full FIA papers for the car, run across the track, cost of entry and cost of everything else. Serious motor racing against some of the world's best sports cars. And while the numbers 3 and 7 figure in my next birthday, they are unbelievably no longer in that order. No one who is competing at Le Mans can approach the circuit, they say, without a certain tingling of the spine. Mine positively rattled. And after all, we were homing in on dreamland. I can't remember crossing the circuit, only being clumsy entering the car. The Nash was the last car away, was not the last car away, and up the pit straight we went towards a mass of cars ahead. Though by now it was as congested as the M25 on a Friday afternoon. But this was just the start of the 8.5-mile warming up lap. At Maison Blanche, the marshals tried to get us into 2 lines and in race order for a rolling start. There was confusion. It was a mess. The safety car wouldn't wait. The race was on. A car in the left-hand lane stalled. I was on the right. That gave me a marvellous start, overhauling the Oscar and putting me alongside an AC Bristol. We dived down through Tetra Rouge and entered the first segment of the Mulsanne Straight together. The AC and the Oscar were alongside. Out accelerating the Nash, contact breaker flutter was doing what the Red Limiter couldn't and keeping me to 5,500 revs. I caught up again under braking and overtook both cars past Indianapolis. Led them up the pit straight, but then desperate to keep ahead, entered the Dunlop S's too fast. All got horribly out of shape and the Nash was across the shelving curbstones and sideways onto the grass, sorting itself out but letting the AC and the Oscar through. For the next lap, I just held them, making up distance lost on the straights through the sweeping Porsche and Ford curves, with the Nash, which the Nash really seemed to like, but it was flat out stuff and they were edging ahead. The Nash was briefly touching 115 miles an hour down the Mulsanne Straight. By now, spots of rain were appearing on the aero screen as we approached Tetra Rouge, and then it started to rain quite heavily at the bottom of the circuit. As we rounded the tight corner at Mulsanne, the red and yellow striped oil flags came out. Casualties appeared by the roadside. I started to reflect on the importance of finishing. It was doubtful if I could catch, let alone overtake, the Oscar. The AC Bristol was in another class. I was comfortably ahead of all the other cars in my own class except the Keith, which was presumably miles ahead. Then the Oscar span off. The pressure was eased, but as the race went on, the track became increasingly slippery. The straight seemed to get shorter and the corners tighter. Braking required increasing pedal pressure, but the Nash was happy and on gorgeous song, and I was at the pinnacle of a waking dream. Suddenly, improbably soon, it was over. There was the finish line, the tribunes, the spectating crowds, and the checkered flag. And then all around the circuit, marshals were waving their flags, and everyone was cheering and clapping the legend cars. It was the Sarthe circuit at Le Mans. It was the day of the 24-hour race. I'd raced the Nash at Le Mans and finished. My eyes were wet at the sheer exquisite joy. Thank you.
Alastair, thank you very much indeed for that. Alastair, as many of you know, had a very clear view about how long he should continue racing. This was expressed in this clip about Britain's oldest racing driver.
Do I like going fast? I suppose I do, strictly within the limits of the law, of course.
At 86, Alastair Pugh could be Britain's oldest racing driver.
Head out on the highway. This is what it's all about.
While his contemporaries are pottering in the slow lane, Alastair still races competitively.
I suppose I am an adrenaline junkie. It does turn me on.
For over 60 years, Alastair has fed his passion for speed by racing pre-war cars at legendary circuits like Donington, Silverstone, and even Le Mans. Just last year, aged 85, he broke a track record at Goodwood.
I read a report of a race in which I entered last year, which said Alastair Pugh took no prisoners. If you're racing, there's only one place to try and be, in the front. If you don't have that as an objective, I can't quite see why you should be there.
Alastair currently has 2 pre-war racing cars. A 1932 Fraser Nash TT replica, which he uses for hill climbs, and a 1939 right-hand drive BMW, a car so rare only 35 were ever made.
Despite being a sort of sports racing car, it has a cigar lighter and it has an ashtray, what we call an alligator bonnet, because it opens that way. You will notice, of course, that the tools are disposed under the bonnet, neatly stored and neatly clipped.
Alastair's cars were built in an era when racing was thrilling but dangerous. Safety was a thin helmet, preparation a stiff brandy, and crashes were frequent and sometimes fatal.
The days when I started, it was very easy. I mean, you just had to buy a helmet and off you went. We didn't wear overalls or gloves or boots or things like that. You just jumped into your car, put your hat on, and off you went. In those days, it was small, it was amateur, and it was great fun, and it was a wonderful arena in which to make a lot of friends.
Alastair shares his passion and his cars with his racing partner, also called, bizarrely, Alastair Pugh.
Ah, Alastair.
Alastair, morning. Good to see you.
Come on in.
Thanks very much. We met when I went to school, and we had to do a letter writing exercise to someone famous or well-known, and I decided to write to the chairman of British Caledonian, who happened to have the same name as me, and that's where our friendship started.
For 20 years, the two Alastairs have been racing in the same events, and although firm friends, have become fierce rivals.
Alastair is a competitive person, and I suppose I am too.
The debate of who's the fastest is still raging. I set the fastest lap in practice.
But I've been faster in races than he has.
I'm still trying to beat him, and one day that'll happen, yeah.
He is very anxious to have another go.
Racing is Alastair's passion, and if Alastair ever stops racing, it'll be a very hard day.
I really hope that I won't be told that I shouldn't be there. I want to recognise that time when it comes for myself. I feel competitive. I think the candle's still alight. I want to keep on racing and keep on with motorsport as long as I can.
Okay. So at that point, it's entirely appropriate for me to hand over to Steve Pryke, the captain of the Fraser Nash Sports Club. Say a few reminiscences about us. Steve.
I'm here today wearing the hat of the captain of the Fraser Nash Car Club. More importantly, I'm very proud to say that Alastair has been a steadfast friend for over half of my life and for almost a third of his long and very full life. I first came across Alastair on a Fraser Nash raid to Scotland that I attended with my late father Hugh. we had visited a gliding school where, to much excitement, the tow cable of the glider in which I was flying snapped at low level, requiring a forced landing. After I'd climbed out of the glider, Alastair suggested that I should be his passenger for the next part of the route in YX9992. It would be fair to say that he was pressing on a little, but driving beautifully. Alastair ensured that there was no time to reflect on the foreshortened glider trip, as there were rather more immediate issues to ponder. Over the years, we've raced our almost identical TT Rex together. Well, when I say identical, I mean in specification, but sadly not in condition. And we've enjoyed some wonderfully close races. At Cadwell, after one very hard-fought battle in the Nash race, Alastair commented in his typical understated way that he was rather surprised to find me overtaking him on the inside at the gooseneck. He suggested that he had not replied in kind, as he had rather more imagination than I clearly had about the possible outcomes of that style of manoeuvre. The last time we raced together was at Snetterton 2 years ago, when I was in the Slug and Alastair was in his immaculate Fraser-Nash BMW 328. We were alongside each other at the starting grid. Both cars are about equal in performance, and after a demon start, I thought I had the better of him. However, I was surprised at the first corner that he appeared overtaking me on the outside, and once in front, firmly but fairly shut the door, ensuring that my advantage was lost. He was tickled by my description in the post-race write-up that he had taken no prisoners, as we've just seen on the TV. As he said to me, not bad for an 87-year-old. I'm sure that everyone in this room has many similar wonderful stories about Alastair like these, which we'll share after this service. Alastair held a racing licence for 67 years. He was the oldest person in the UK to be in possession of a racing licence at the end of his career. His racing highlights included 2 racing visits to Le Mans, racing in Dunedin in New Zealand, racing at the Nürburgring, multiple appearances at Angoulême, multiple appearances at Goodwood, both up to the time the circuit was closed and following Lord March's current reopening, and 67 seasons of VSCC racing. Along with racing, Alastair is a regular competitor in hill climbs and sprints at most venues within the UK. Within reason, his cars were always driven to and from the meetings. This is a record that I cannot ever imagine will be surpassed. It was very appropriate that Alastair's last race was in the Freddie Giles Memorial Trophy for Fraser-Nash cars at Silverstone in 2018, as Freddie was a great friend of Alastair and another Fraser-Nash hero. Alastair was at his most happy behind the wheel of one of his cars and when surrounded by his friends. All 3 of the cars with which he is most closely associated, his 1928 Fraser-Nash Supersports YX9992, the 1932 ex-Aldington Alpine Trial Fraser-Nash TT Rep MV3079 that he shared with its owner and very close friend Angus Cundy, and his 1938 Fraser-Nash BMW 328 HTU 446 were always immaculate, with Alastair doing most of the fettling himself. He took great pride in maintaining the cars in the condition that they were in when new, which, with a Nash, is a massive task owing to the constant maintenance demands of the car. The continued success that Alastair enjoyed with all the cars over many years in national and international events is a testament to his mechanical skill and persistent pursuit of excellence that so typifies everything that he did. In recent years, Alastair had been involved in a symbiotic relationship with his namesake, Alastair Pugh, and Tim Jarrett. Tim and Alastair have helped Alastair Senior, or A1P1 as he came to be known, with maintaining the cars, and in return they have enjoyed driving the cars with great success. The 3 of them formed a very close-knit team, and I know how much Alastair valued and appreciated all the time that we both committed to him, as much as you both valued his paternalistic guidance. Alastair had been involved with Nashing since 1949, when he purchased YX9992, aged 21. Like all of us, he appreciated the lightweight, high-performance design of the cars, and after purchasing his Supersports, he joined the Fraser-Nash section of the Vintage Sports Car Club. In 1954, he and the Supersports took part in the first Anglo-American rally in the UK, and then, in 1957, with works preparation from Isleworth, the Nash was transported to the States for the return match. No one will be surprised to hear that Alastair won the Premier Award for Best Individual Performance. Alastair's participation in the American leg of the Anglo-American Rally represents the first significant post-war journey by a pre-war Fraser-Nash to foreign climes, and obviously whetted the appetite for further forays abroad. It was not long before the Fraser-Nash section planned its first visit to the continent to commemorate Clive Gallop's success in the 1925 Boulogne Grand Prix. Unsurprisingly, Alastair was there with his Supersports, along with 7 other Fraser-Nash motor cars. It should be remembered that this was uncharted territory for a small motor club, but with all the usual Nash excitement, the Fraser-Nash Jolly to Boulogne took place. And apart from one member facing several minor motoring infringements, including no horn, no lights, no silencer, no wings, and no number plate, and consequently requiring legal representation to the local police, the weekend was a great success. In 1968, Alastair's Supersports was used as the recce car for the first Fraser-Nash visit to Bolzano. YX9992 had a massive failure on its way to the ferry in 1969, so Alastair was forced to use alternate transport for the duration of the 1969 raid. It was on that trip that the term raid was first used, and as always, Alastair was at the heart of things. A short summary of Alastair's unparalleled Fraser-Nash raid experience consists of 5 Bolzano raids. He was entered for a 6th Bolzano this year, 2 Alpine trials, 4 Boulogne trips, sundry raids including New England and the USA, which he helped organise with his usual meticulous attention to detail, New Zealand, Sicily, Pyrenees ×2, Slovenia, Corsica, Ireland, and of course many smaller raids within the UK. On all of those long-distance, hard-motoring trips, with the exception of the first Bolzano raid, I cannot remember, or remember reading about, Alastair's cars having many significant mechanical maladies, which speaks volumes for his fastidious car preparation. One of Alastair's great qualities was his single-minded approach to life. He had a steely determination that would allow him to work his way around or through most problems, resulting in a satisfactory outcome. John Terry, who was the secretary of the Fraser-Nash section when Alastair was captain, told me that before each committee meeting, Alastair would phone him and systematically run through the agenda for the meeting and instruct John on how he would like things to be decided. This enabled John to write the minutes before the meetings took place. And those minutes seldom needed amending. Now, I've taken note of that approach, and I'm going to put that into practice for the rest of my period of captaincy. Alastair also applied this single-minded approach to his motoring, where almost no obstacle or barrier to success was not planned for and overcome. The Fraser-Nash Car Club is blessed to have a wealth of eager young members. Alastair realised that this was important when he was captain, and strived to make the club as inclusive as possible to prevent the club expiring through old age. With Alastair's leadership and example, the tradition of transferring significant unused spare chunks of motor car to younger members was born, and the willingness of members to allow young members to use their cars continues to be one of our club's great strengths. After standing down from the Fraser-Nash committee, Alastair continued to use his cars unabated. I know that all the past captains have benefited from his wisdom. He commanded authority and was a wonderful speaker who was able to put his views across succinctly and in a non-adversarial way. He enriched our AGMs with lively, thought-provoking, amusing debate, which we all look forward to every year. It's no surprise that he went on to become an honorary member, and at the time of his death was also our club patron. We'd asked him to take up this post for several years, but in true Alastair fashion, he turned it down, wryly commenting with a twinkle in his eye that he did not think he had adequate experience to allow him to take up the place of leader. Along with all the time that he gave up to the Frasernash Car Club, Alastair was also one of the founding trustees of the Frasernash Archives. Following the death of John Aldington, Alastair was instrumental in running and developing the archives, building them into the fantastic resource that they are now. He later went on to become chairman of the archives, and at the time of his death was also archives patron. Now, all of these small vignettes of Alastair showed little glimpses of his character and gentle nature that made him held in such high regard by all who met him. I've taken the following sentences from members of the Frasernash Car Club, which capture the essence of Alastair much more elegantly than I am able to. He was an enormous inspiration in all that he did. Above all, he was a hugely decent, caring, loving human being, and the best friend anyone could have. He was one of the most inspiring people I've ever met. I shall miss his humorous, measured, honest views, all delivered with that mischievous twinkle in his eye. I can't think of many people who enriched everyone's life they came into contact with, but Alastair managed this with consummate ease. We must ensure that we all remember his example and continue to maintain his values and keep gnashing as often and as hard as possible. What a wonderful, kind and courageous and true gentleman he was. I learnt much from Alastair. Alastair was inspirational and his enthusiasm rubbed off on those around him. He was a loyal friend, a Nash man to the core, who was never happier than behind the wheel. He was our leading light, our inspiration, and a steadfast friend. In conclusion, we have been blessed to have known Alastair and for him to have been a part of our lives. We all express our sincerest condolences to Giles, Emma, and Marketta on their profound loss. The Frasernash Car Club and the wider world of historic cars, and the world in general, will be a poorer place now that he is no longer among us. Dearest Alastair, may you rest in peace.
Alastair, as we've heard, has had a long connection with Brooklands. And so here he is only last year interviewed at the Double 12.
Good morning and welcome to Brooklands for the 2018 Double 12 in association with the VSCC. Okay, I'm here with Alastair Pugh, who owns this marvellous Frasernash. Alastair, welcome.
Thank you.
And can you tell us a little bit about the history of the car?
Quite interesting. It was built, as all Frasernash BMWs were, in Germany before the war, and it was imported in 1939. Now, I don't have to tell you that German motor cars weren't all that popular in 1939.
I can't imagine why.
No, well, quite. So customs impounded it.
Oh, right.
And it was just a chassis. And it stayed impounded until 1946.
Right.
And then it was
released.
The body was put on by AFN, the Frasernash cars people. And
who were based in where at the time?
At Isleworth. So it's a rather strange mixture of English and German, although the body is actually a genuine German body. And so we know the first owner, and then there was a long period where history's got a bit blank.
Yeah.
And I got hold of the car about 30 years ago.
Right.
I've competed in it
ever
since.
Yeah, it's campaigned well, absolutely.
It's probably one of the very few Frasernash BMWs actually competing still.
So this now naturally leads us to Trevor Tarring, who, as always, has a limerick for our occasion. Trevor, over to you.
Alastair was brave, but not rash. Kept his cars up with long hours and cash. What a great life he had. But do not be sad. In Valhalla, he's driving an ash.
As always, absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Now, I'm not the only person to come across a piece of paper left by Alastair. Robin Lightwood came across a piece as well. So let me hand you over to Robin to tell you about it.
The short quotation which I'm about to read to you fell out of a book which Alastair had lent me. Let me explain. I first met Alastair 25 years ago on the operating table. He was actually on the table and I was doing something to sort out a blockage in the fuel system. Once he had recovered from his operation, he decided that I really ought to be a member of the chain gang. It took a while for him to persuade me, but we all know what Alastair was like. And sooner or later, I joined him. Once he had me under his wing, he acted as mentor. And part of that process was giving me pieces to read, various articles, books, the Nash workshop manual, the history of the chain gang, and the Dunlop guide to the circuits, the race circuits of the United Kingdom. And it was out of that that the piece of paper fell. I think it was probably in the page on Cadwell Park, which was his favourite for racing the chain gang. I'm going to read you the quotation. It's very short, so attend carefully. It's taken from a book called The Proud Highway, written by an American, Hunter Thompson. Life is not a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a well-preserved body, but rather to skid in broadside, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, "Wow, what a ride!"
Okay, so at this point we're going to start to make the transition from four wheels to fixed wing. But at this point really, I think it's suitable for Alastair himself to give you a short demonstration. And this is a flying demonstration, but the difference is it's 6 inches above the ground.
We live in an age when new ideas in the fields of engineering, aeronautics, and in fact all forms of propulsion develop so rapidly that many of us find it difficult to keep abreast of the times. This revolutionary contraption, for example, is the result of combining two forms of transport, the hovercraft and the motor scooter. Not unnaturally, it's called the hover scooter. Just to confuse the issue, the driver on this occasion, Alastair Pugh, is a qualified pilot. However, although the hover scooter is technically airborne, there's no chance of her rising above the 6 inches or so of air cushion. Use of the handlebars for steering illustrates its similarity to the conventional scooter. Brought over from the United States by a leading motorcycle journal, the hover scooter rides, as you can see, on a cushion of air, with this air being drawn in through cowling at the front of the machine by a specially designed propeller, which is in turn powered by a 250cc motorcycle engine. The floating on air principle makes it equally adaptable for water travel. The so-called air cushion is actually provided by air being thrust downwards under the machine, and steering is by altering with the handlebars the angle at which the air hits the ground, and by the pilot balancing his weight accordingly. Because of its construction, the machine itself is actually buoyant, so that it will float even when the power is cut. Point is, where do we go from here?
Those of you that are from VCAL, perhaps we could take you on 2 short flights down memory lane. Alan.
Eastern girls are hip, I really dig the styles they wear. And American girls, with the way they talk, they knock me out when I fly there. Latin stewardesses really make you feel alright. And the German girls really do their best to keep their passengers warm at night. I've been all around this great big world, and I've flown with all kinds of girls. But I can't wait to get back to Gatwick, to the cutest girls in the world. I wish they all could be Caledonian. I wish they all could be Caledonian. I wish they all could be Caledonian girls.
British Caledonian, we never forget you have a choice.
Good morning from CTA 772. We are marker inbound.
772, minimum approach speed, please. There's one to depart ahead of you. The wind is 300 at 20 knots, 20 knots.
Roger, reducing and the departing aircraft is down.
767 is passing behind you now. Caledonia 5415, the surface wind is 320 at 10 knots. You are cleared takeoff.
Do take off Caledonia 5415.
All my bags are packed, I'm ready to go. I'm standing here outside your door. I hate to wake you up to say goodbye, but the dawn is breaking, it's early morning.
Britannia 002 Alpha, clear to land runway 26, the surface wind 3005 knots.
So lonesome I could cry. So kiss me and smile for me. Tell me that you'll wait for me. Hold me like you'll never let me go. I'm leaving on a jet plane. I don't know when I'll be back again. Oh babe, I hate to go. There's so many times I've let you down, so many times I've played around. I tell you now, they don't mean a thing. Every place I go, I think of you. Every song I sing for you. When I come back, I'll wear your wedding ring. So kiss me and smile for me. Tell me that you'll wait for me. Hold me like you'll never let me go. I'm leaving on a jet plane. I don't know when I'll be back again. Oh babe, I hate to go. Now the time has come to leave you. One more time, let me kiss you, then close your eyes, I'll be on my way. Dream about the days to come when I won't have to leave alone. About the time I won't have to say. Kiss me and smile for me. Tell me that you'll wait for me. Hold me like you'll never let me go. I'm leaving on a jet plane. I don't know when I'll be back again, leaving on a jet plane. I don't know when I'll be back again, leaving on a jet plane. I don't know when I'll be back again. Oh babe, I hate to go.
Well, at this point, it can only be Pugh Smith. So, Peter, over to you.
My, when you see that, the years just fall away. Now, I've been asked to talk about Alastair and his aviation life. I'm more than usually apprehensive, and my apprehension is entirely personal. As a junior manager in Alastair's planning team, I would be occasionally asked to produce a paper on some topic. I would take it to him. No email in those days. He'd direct me to a seat. There was silence, but an occasional marginal note would be added to my paper. He'd finish, look up and say, "Peter, this is very interesting, but what I really wanted." I hope the words and thoughts today will be in large measure what Alastair really wanted. Today is a celebration and a Thanksgiving. We celebrate, as I hope I will show, a memorable aviation life lived in step with all the civil transport age. And we, as friends and colleagues, have to be thankful not only for that life, but that also so many of us, of all ages and nationalities in the industry, have benefited from his company, from his inspiration, support and instruction. When Alastair was born in 1928, the Zeppelin had just crossed the Atlantic. Croydon Airport had opened. It took about 2 weeks to fly from Britain to Australia, with much more time on the ground than in the air. So some things never changed. Air routes were planned from such exotic locations as Hunstanton to King's Lynn, and from Portsmouth to various destinations in the Isle of Wight. What limitless horizons those early pioneers had. Alastair was destined to be a fine airman. A new industry was emerging as he grew up. His father was an RAF Padre killed in World War II. He flew aged 7 with a second cousin, Rosamond Everard, who was an ATA pilot. That she was also a beauty queen might have been influential as well. He was an aircraft modeller and a tentative aircraft designer in his teens, with the confidence to send his designs to de Havilland's. Those drawings were good enough to secure admission to the de Havilland Technical School aged 17. I think that response from de Havilland to a young man in 1945 made Alastair always open to the ideas of other young men and women who wanted to be in civil aviation. A passion to fly paralleled his passion for cars. He flew solo at 18. He trained as a cadet in the Royal Air Force Volunteer Reserve. Alastair contracted polio as a young man. In bed for 3 months, he flew as soon as he was discharged with his best friend Tony Guy. To his relief, he found that he could still work flight controls. John Loder, a friend from de Havilland, would carry him to and from his Fraser-Nash as he recovered. That determination to overcome setbacks and challenges were part of the man throughout his life. Graduating from technical school, where his specialisation was engine installation, which remained throughout his life in the need to have a Fraser-Nash engine in bits on a bench beside him, he worked for a flight control company before joining Flight magazine in 1956. He recalled flight as a wonderful place to work. He could fly. The small team was stimulating and inquisitive, and he found Mike Ransom, the air transport editor, a mentor for commercial aviation, of which he admitted that he had little knowledge. I think that experience of a mentor stayed with Alastair too. He said he found writing to deadlines hard, and this was a reason to move on. I have to say that I never experienced him having a problem with words. I suspect there was also a wish not simply to write about aviation, but to shape its future. From 1961 to 1964, Alastair worked for Channel Air Bridge, introducing the new 5-car Carb Air freighter into service. In parallel, at the behest of Sir Freddie Laker, he was seconded into BUA to seek scheduled service licenses, allowing UK independent airlines, such as BUA, to compete against the state airlines BEA and BOAC. Civil aviation, we forget these days, was very heavily regulated at the time, on routes, on prices, on even the size of sandwiches, but it was beginning to change. And Alastair's natural home was the independent sector, free to innovate, free to operate, and free to price. He will be remembered alongside Sir Freddie Laker, Fred Newman of Danair, Alan Bristow, Sir Adam Thompson and others as one of those pushing against state-regulated aviation and the rigidity of bilateral air service agreements. In BCAL, the message, as you heard, was that we never forget you had a choice. And Alastair, along with those peers, wanted to provide choice. Unlike his peers, he was more intent on providing a cogent, competitive rationale for open markets. He and those contemporaries were the pioneers from whose struggling efforts in the 60s and 70s, EasyJet, Ryanair, Norwegian, and other low-cost airlines, as well as Virgin, have emerged. From 1964 to 1988, Alastair's life was the UK independent sector, first with British United, then Caledonian BUA, and finally British Caledonian Airways, more affectionately known, as you've heard, as BCAL. He was always in a leading role as planning director, production director, managing director, director of strategy, and executive vice chairman. All the time, he was at the heart of what the airline thought and did. He led the inputs into evolving government civil aviation policy for 2 decades. Along with John Prothero Thomas and his planning team, he led the push for new route opportunities in the United States, Middle and Far East to lessen BCAL's dependence on Africa and South America. And he was well respected in the Civil Aviation Authority, in government, and indeed among competitors as courteous, intellectually sound, expressive and effective. And he innovated. Boy, did he innovate. Alastair introduced business class to break the straitjacket of economy and first-class service. Dedicated cabin, new seating, new styles of service, a car at either end to collect and deposit you. How normal it seems today, how innovative and opposed it was then. He championed Mini-Pre, perhaps not the best name, low-cost, simple fares in Europe, partly as a means of raising connected traffic at Gatwick and to encourage more leisure traffic other than on package holidays. The idea met the fiercest resistance from the European scheduled airlines. Again, how ordinary it seems today. Alastair at British Caledonian helped push open the door to a liberal European aviation market, with open skies for its airlines. But BCAL, in 1988, at the end of its life, only flew 6 European destinations from Gatwick. EasyJet, with open access today, now operate to more than 100 destinations from that airport. For his considerable services to civil aviation, Alastair was awarded a CBE in 1986. Predominantly a long-haul airline, largely dependent on Nigeria, BCAL was heavily affected by fuel prices and carried the development costs of its bigger network. And the airline's profitability sagged in the mid-1980s, and manpower and route reductions followed. The government at the time was anxious to privatise British Airways. There was an aviation review, principally determined the balance between British Airways privately and the second force, British Caledonia. The outcome was a modest swap of routes, and more routes sought for that second British carrier, BCAL. It was not the best result for BCAL, but the government's desire to get BA off its books outweighed any idea of substantial competitive change. With an economic downturn and substantially unchanged but privatised BA at Heathrow, I think Alastair saw a very difficult future for British Caledonian at Gatwick. By now, he'd relinquished operational leadership of the airline and focused on its strategy. 3i, that was its principal shareholder, wanted out. The airline sought a buyer. Air Europe, Delta, SAS, all expressed interest. SAS, introduced by Alastair, and BCAL spent most time together, with John Thornton and Paul Dayton, now Lord Dayton of Goldman Sachs, as the advisors. But John King of British Airways recognised the risks to a newly privatised BA of stronger competition in its home market. It had seen what British Caledonian was doing to it in the Far East, especially with a new route non-stop across Siberia to Tokyo, and what it was doing in North America. And that British Caledonian team of Alastair, David Coleman and Sir Adam Thompson's, along with Goldman's, played a remarkable game, extracting £250 million for British Airways from marginally profitable airline at the time and with little cash. And they secured very fair terms for all the BCAL staff in the subsequent integration. But in early 1988, British Caledonian was taken over by BA. Now, it's a very fitting tribute to Alastair that 30 years on, British Caledonia is still remembered with affection by so many, both its staff and passengers, and you find this all over the world. Alastair was now 60. He might have hung up his aviation boots, but there were many more years of active aviation work for him. He became president of the Chartered Institute of Transport and the Institute of Freight Forwarders. He was a senior air transport advisor to Goldman Sachs for nearly 20 years, working especially with Randy Cecil. He formed his own consultancy with secretarial help from Anne Blackburn, although he mastered modern IT. He pops up, both for Goldman's and his own company, advising, for example, Air France, Royal Jordanian, China Eastern, and he pops up in the steppes of Mongolia and the more remote regions of the Pacific. His experience, his wisdom, his energy made the ambitious, alien and awkward of our industry seek him out. And of course, he was the prime mover from 1988 with Sir Peter Masefield and later with Allan Winn in the Brooklands Museum. And this continued, as you know, to the very end of his life. The museum and the Brooklands Society represented in content, in ethos and in history much of what he held closest, a link between his passion for cars and his passion for aircraft. The fact that he could also race cars through Brooklands might have been an additional attraction. Again, his sagacity, his enthusiasm, and his connections made him the most excellent trustee. He's helped secure the legacy of this wonderful place, which at the start was far from certain. What a career, born with the exclusivity of the Zeppelin and Imperial Airways, and ending with aviation as widely available and affordable for us all. Alastair's lifetime has been at the heart of British civil aviation. Now, when I thought what I should say today, I knew I needed to say more than just recount and chronicle a career. I had to say something about the man and try to capture the essence of why he will be missed and why we are thankful to have known him. Now, if you look at the British Caledonian website, it's full of tributes to Alastair, and I've just extracted a few of the comments that you find in it. A fine and kind man, a lovely man, a great man in the business, a character with great enthusiasm, a pioneer professional, a guide and a mentor, made BCAL a great airline to work for, probably the best boss I had in my career, a very true friend. My working in the aviation industry is down to ATP. So let me just take you through some personal memories that people have given me of the man that reveals elements of his nature. And most of the people I'm going to refer to are in this room today. Jackie Dillon remembers going on a special investigation with Alastair to seek coffee-making equipment to match the quality of coffee served on board Swissair. They may have failed to match the Swissair coffee, but that devotion to service excellence was exemplary. Ranald Noel Payton, as a young man, remembers being interviewed by Alastair and saying to him, "I don't know much about civil aviation," to which Alastair replied, "Well, that shouldn't disqualify you." Harking back to his early life when he didn't know much about aviation, Alastair was championing the enthusiasm of the young. David Richardson told me that Alastair called him in and said, "We're thinking about doing something with Sabina. Can you write a paper?" David asked, "What are we thinking of doing?" The reply was, "Well, I don't know. That's why you're writing a paper." Never stop being curious. Brian Davis remembers Alastair at a very rough time for the airline, ensuring that he particularly was settled in well when he joined from British Airways. Alastair knew that his colleagues and his staff were as important as strategy. I remember a flight on a competitor airline. The wheels were up, service had begun, Alastair was offered a drink from the trolley. The attendant handed Alastair the glass. The glass was misformed, with the stem at an angle to the bowl. Alastair took the glass, although it could not have stood on the table. He looked at the flight attendant and asked whether, with its angled stem, this was a glass that had been specially designed for takeoff. Many of us remember his capacity for falling asleep, often as a result of working long hours and then working on his cars. Ranald tells me he remembers him sleeping at a meeting with the head of an airline. Unabashed, Alastair said afterwards, "Well, I didn't think he was very interesting, did you?" Glenn Jennings recounts a wild ride with Alastair in a camera helicopter, in and out of the New York skyline, piloted by an ex-US Special Forces pilot, never one to miss a flight involving risks. And I recall a determination to succeed when BCAL was awarded authority to fly to Hong Kong. I think his proudest moment, following hearings, appeals and all sorts of calumnies against this upstart airline, was dotting the I of the BCAL line on the tail of the DC-10 on its inaugural flight into Hong Kong. So what of the man we remember? Certainly, kindness and courtesy, regardless of age or position, mentoring and leadership, imagination, intelligence, a wide international curiosity, pleasure in challenges and risks, humour, determination and bravery. We can all aspire to these characteristics, but we are fortunate if we possess just a few of them. In October, when he was 90, Alastair wrote, "While I'm now officially old, I do occasionally manage to try and demonstrate that there were a couple of sparks left. Yes, Alastair, there were always more than a couple of sparks around. And those sparks have influenced so many others. The splendid memories of you, for so many of us, over such a long period of time, is your legacy, and I hope it comfort your family. And Alastair, that's my paper for this tribute drafted. I remain anxious, however, that somewhere I will hear the words, 'That's interesting, Peter, what I really wanted.'"
Peter, that was just superb. I think the current phrase is awesome, so thank you. So before I hand over to Canon Chris Valence to say a short final prayer, firstly I'd like to thank my partner in crime, Allan Winn. Thank you very much indeed. I'd also like to thank all of you. There have been many of you who've sent in images, photographs, videos, so thank you for that. And thank you to all the absolutely fantastic speakers today. So let me hand over to Canon Chris.
Thank you. Alastair, we send you off with thanksgiving and with celebration on your last great journey. May the roads rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. May the rains fall soft upon fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand.